I think everybody is here now. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Improved Outcomes for Neurodiverse Learners. We're really excited to meet with you today. I have with me an educational specialist in our highly curated network, Taya Slingland, who I'll allow to introduce herself in short. First of all, I am the head of educational services, Jess Corinne, with Learnfully. I started my educational career as a classroom teacher and then have spent 20 years in private practice, really refining my multisensory evidence-based implementation and the teacher training thereof. So I'm so excited to be here. I'm glad my path brought me to Learnfully. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Taya, and she can give you a little bit of background about herself.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, I'm Taya Slingland. I too have been in education for more than 20 years. Mine has been in the classroom and started in general ed for a number of those years. And basically, it all started with a single student. That student, the traditional ways of teaching weren't met. So I went back to school and became an education specialist, and I got my master's in that and went forward to teach and specialize. So I did a number of years in RSP from K through sixth grade and an intervention specialist, and then taught online prior to the pandemic. And here I am. So I'm excited also to join Learnfully with Jess and the team and see what we can do together.
Great, thank you. I'm so happy that you're with us. So today we're going to provide a brief overview as to Learnfully's mission. We're also going to talk through the screening tools and their purpose, their use. Thereafter, we'll discuss personalized recommendation and individualization thereafter, as well as the dynamic collaboration that can take its course and really contribute to the overall goal, which is really putting our learners on a personalized and positive path to their potential. And then we'll open up the floor for discussion and reflection. We are opening up the chat for any questions that you may have. Hopefully we'll get to those, but of course, if we don't, we'll circle back with you and ensure that you get the answers that you need. Learnfully is a personalized platform. Really, it's a huge resource of both content and highly curated educational specialists. So what we do first is we start with the screening process, which we will of course talk through, but then we match our learners to an educational specialist who has the certification and credentialing, as well as the dynamic personality to engage and maintain our learners' attention. We have tailored approaches to ensure that we're meeting our learners' needs through multisensory evidence-based approaches. We start by laying the framework for how to learn, and then we build upon that to ensure that they're able to see the success of generalizing their efforts into the classroom and beyond. We're continuing to build out our content to ensure that our learners have resources both for reinforcement in between their instructional sessions, as well as to provide educators and parents with the coaching that they deserve to really support and bolster their learners' strengths. And then, of course, we pride ourselves on having proactive communication channels in place. We want to make sure that our team has all the information they need, that they also have the opportunity to observe progress firsthand, and that we can connect with both parents and educators as like a trifecta to put our learners on a positive path and continue their growth in and out of our sessions. Take it away, Taya.
Take it away. Okay. So Learnfully is multisensory. When we look at interventions, we have to consider where the child is coming uniquely from. We have our three venues that we're processing pathways. We're looking at auditory, visual, and bodily kinesthetic. The reason we need to look at these is because we need to understand what the child is bringing to our classroom. When we're looking at a large group of students, all of them learning differently, understanding a little bit about how each one learns, we can better hone in our teaching skills to that particular group of students. When we look at these children, we often don't realize the complexity of these disorders. Often the child can look like they're inattentive. They can be daydreamers. They can be a little bit more fidgety than normal, and it looks more like an attention issue, and it's not. It's basically, think of it like a filter. They're taking too much information in and they can process at one time. So we can give you recommendations on how to slow that down with a little bit more refinement than, hey, we're going to chunk, and give you some key tips that are going to help your group as a whole and not just the one child. So thereby making your life easier.
Isn't that the truth?
Still going here. Okay, so the next thing is when we look at the different, this one actually discuss Orton Gillingham. Orton Gillingham is like the Kleenex of intervention. It's the mothership. It's
Mhm.
the start of that multisensory. Now we might hear the term Linda Mood Bell, we might hear Barton, we might hear some other ones, but the basis are in that Orton Gillingham process. And that is just basically when we go to give material to a student, we need to come at it from as many different neural pathways as we can. We want them not just to see it, to say it, to sing it, to feel it. All
Mhm.
these different neural pathways can create a stronger connection without need for as much repetition. So thereby, again, making your classroom easier to manage and engaging and fun for the group as a whole.
I love that. It's really shifting our lens from the power of memorization to fully digestion, right? And processing information as a whole instead of feeling like you have to cram right before kind of performing in a testing environment. It ensures that you fully understand and conceptualize what you're learning. So I appreciate that, Taya. Thanks for sharing. That leads us into the dual coding theory. Dual coding theory is one of the theories that we utilize in each and every one of our sessions. This represents the subcomponents of the learning process. What Ellen Pavio discovered in 1971 is that we translate information, verbal and oral information, into our mind's eye in two simultaneous ways. One way is static. We picture the letters or the digits that correspond to information. So if I were to say the word cat, your brain would picture the symbols, CAT, that correspond with how we spell the word cat. On the flip side, however, we can also see the vivid and dynamic image that's conceptual. So my cat might be orange and fluffy, whereas Taya's cat might be black and sleek. So the experience that we activate can absolutely generate that image, and it allows our learners to tap into that creativity as well as their mental movie making skills to understand, conceptualize, and avoid the act of memorization, as we were saying.
Okay, so this leads us to why do we screen? So, I go back as an educator, why do we benchmark? The
Mhm.
reason that we screen is students are more than just education data. They have a whole child behind that criterion. So screening allows us to interact with a student in in that real way that gauges interest and establishes rapport, because as we know as educators, rapport is everything. If we want
Mhm.
something to, the more we enjoy and feel validated in the classroom, the more apt we are to be engaged with it. We want them to learn how they prefer to learn, but also through this we are going to develop learner curated profiles, and the profiles are more than just isolated strengths and areas of need. We do that, but we also look at it. See, when we look in a classroom and think, okay, second grade, we're going to be working within second grade. By the end of second grade, we need to know this. But if you have a child that has deficits, those deficits are different for every second grader. So we need to look at where they are developed on a developmental hierarchy within each of those skill sets. So if we do that, then we can better plug in the holes of where they are missing and present a better function as far as their education. That backfilling is important. Also, the looking at the goal setting and short-term progress monitoring, you want to make sure that in a classroom you're kind of doing those little checks to make sure that of understanding. It's a little bit richer for an intervention because we have a shorter
Mm.
amount of times and it's much more concentrated. And since we are looking at children that have possible learning differences and that kind of thing, it's much more meaningful.
Most certainly. And I really appreciate that you highlight establishing rapport because, as we know, connectivity leads to the highest level of results. We can really maximize engagement. And by incorporating strengths and interests, that's another way to really optimize your time with one who learns differently so they can feel seen and heard. And, like you said, learn how they learn best through metacognition. So, thank you for that, Taya. I appreciate it.
Okay, so Now, what does this mean? So we're talking about 3-point scale, and we've moved in the classroom toward rubrics,
Mhm.
toward a benchmark. The A, B, and C are kind of going out for 0, 1, 2, 3, or however your district is adopted. Been with a few different districts over the years, and they've all kind of twisted a little bit differently. The way Learnfully is looking at it is we are not just an average of their performance over time, and that's how we change from the traditional A, B, and C. We want to see in real life or in real time what they're actually functioning at. So if they're emerging, that means their skill at that moment is still emerging. They're not
Mhm.
there. But if they are developing, we know that in a bell curve, that developing stage from low average to high average is a rather large piece of the pie. But by giving you not just they're developing, but kind of where that range they're at, gives you a better idea of they're almost there, or we're developing but we're not quite to where toward independence. So in the top tier is obviously independence. We want mastery. We want them to be able to go and away from us and be able to produce the material.
I absolutely agree. And I think with that level of independence comes those feelings of success and confidence so they can dive in and take initiative, take risks, and really lean into discomfort just by feeling that added layer of success through autonomy and through automaticity. So
Absolutely.
Learnfully screening. Well, Learnfully screening is a 1 to 2 hour virtual process. Essentially, what we do is we really want to gauge exactly where their strengths lie, as well as pinpoint where the breakdown might be occurring in both their underlying skills and their application thereof. So we do that in a multiplicity of ways. One component that we're measuring is their literacy skills. So we're looking at their phonics, their phonological processing, their orthographic skills, which is sight words and spelling patterns, their ability to contextually read, to comprehend, to process information orally and think critically. So it's quite the gamut underneath the umbrella term of literacy that we're looking to measure. We're also gauging their mathematics skills, how they do with not just computing through the algorithms and such, but also how they do with conceptualizing the vocabulary and word problems, how they process that paragraph of information with a math context. Executive functioning is a very broad stroke term, and I provided a graphic here because it can be rather complex. It's essentially 8 different underlying subcomponent skills that impact our ability to manage our daily happenings. I see it like the CEO or the conductor of our brain that really allows our neural pathways to be streamlined to the areas that will maximize and access organizational skills, time management, flexibility, initiation, even attention span falls under here. And then, of course, behaviors that interfere with learning. I mean, as we all know, behaviors can impact a child's ability to access their potential. It doesn't necessarily represent their underlying potential. And so it can serve as a mask or a fog that blocks that learner from really being on that positive trajectory. And we want to be able to gauge what those behaviors are and then provide recommendations and strategies to prevent them. Which leads me to the importance of really looping in and hooking in our learners through interests. At Learnfully, we are a student or learner-centered model. And so we incorporate all aspects of interest as well as the personalization that is required for our learners to maximize the opportunities. We start with personalized learning by differentiating our recommendations and individualizing implementation. But then we also, of course, set goals that are both short and long term to ensure that our learners are reaching a level of competency. We make sure that our learners feel engaged, that they own and are accountable to the process, that they feel bought in through incorporating their interests and their strengths. And then, of course, we want our learners to be able to apply and generalize and carry over their skills anytime, anywhere. So this carryover effect should be rather seamless, regardless of the environment, because we're bolstering their underlying skills and providing that added layer of bravado so they can dive in to just about any challenge that comes their way in a deeper fashion. All right, Taya, 7 different learning styles.
Oh, I didn't realize I was doing this one. Wonderful. Okay, so like I had mentioned earlier, when we're talking about multisensory, when we're talking about gauging interest, when one of the things we need to look at is that 7 different learning styles. It brings us back to our teaching days when we're first in the classroom going, okay, what learning style are we going to get? It's important to keep in mind when you look at the 7 different learning styles that you can be more than one.
Mhm.
And that there is, depending on the particular subject matter, you can lean toward one versus the other. So it's important to create and curate lessons that have multiple ones going at the same time, because I always tell my kids, if we're tickling the brain, we're going to tickle the brain as many different ways as we can. One, it's engaging to do that, and two, it also makes sure that we are hitting all the different learning styles in the classroom. And I remember as a brand new teacher going, oh, there's
Mm.
7 of them, how am I going to do that? And there actually is ways around that, and that's one of the things that we want to bring our 20 years experience, right, Jess, to in the classroom, both in general and special ed, and help you, give you real experience. And okay, you have this going on, this is what you can do.
Yep, to
And
strategize.
yeah, give you those bag of tricks that we have gotten over the years on how to do visual and musical and bodily kinesthetic. And that's the whole idea behind this learning styles.
Absolutely. And I think it just like you nailed it. It's important to note that our learners evolve and shift just like we do as adults. And so the learning style that we're be able to pinpoint within our screening process is really that moment in time. And we fully acknowledge that that's a snapshot into our learners' abilities. But we also like to use learning styles as a method to really engage our learners through metacognition. We find it extremely empowering for our learners to learn how they learn best, and also fully recognizing that these learning styles can be a combination, as you said, but they also can shift and change based on the demand or based on the maturation, right? So I think it's important that we look at this as one piece of this grand puzzle into our learners' underlying abilities and where we see their potential.
Yes, it's just like the rubrics. You make sure we're hitting many different boxes.
That's right. We wanted to provide you with a sample report. Learnfully screening process is relatively thorough for 2 hours of time, and so is our report. What we're able to provide you with as educators and as caregivers alike is really a delineation of their strengths, their challenges, and real-time strategies that you can utilize both in the classroom and at home so you can reach each and every one of your learners. We also provide recommendations. This is a snapshot, and we also will get into a more thorough take of that in a second. We like to use the 3-point scale, as Taya mentioned, throughout each component building block subskill. So as we're talking through the literacy markers, the math markers, what's expected in executive functioning, as well as the behaviors, we're providing you with a visual breakdown in terms of how your learner is meeting the expectations of both their age and their grade. We provide individualized learning recommendations. It's really important that we find educational specialists who have the certification and training in multisensory evidence-based approaches so that we can maximize the time we have one-on-one with our learners. We also provide small group enrichment, which I'll speak to soon, but it's just as important in enrichment programs that we have multisensory approaches in our back pocket to ensure that our implementation is done with fidelity. Majority of our educational specialists have training in Orton Gillingham. Others have training also in Lindemood Bell, Wilson Reading System, Making Math Real, and Social Thinking. The list really goes on. If you don't see a program here that you would recommend for one of your learners, then the benefit of Learnfully is that we'll seek out that professional to provide the instruction for your learner. So we have the ability to cast a wide net to ensure that we're finding the right specialists for your learner. So if there's something that we don't have here, we'll go out and find it to make sure that we're maximizing again and optimizing that time with our learners. Family support is absolutely prime. And so I'm going to let Taya explain how we incorporate our caregivers to the learning process.
Okay, so family support can be different for different families because let's face it, the world's evolving. How we interact is different. Some parents prefer, text. Some parents prefer email. I'm sure that I'm not telling anything new to a teacher on that regard, but the coaching is different based on their needs. So I have parents that I'm creating videos on how to assist them at home. I'm creating slide decks to give the child as further, or boom cards, or peer decks, all these things that we're curating for the child's individual needs. Proactive communication is just a earmark for Learnfully, I'd have to say. We are in constant contact with these parents. The parents really want to see, they're worried, and they, that's the calming effect is that communication. So we, on top of session notes, basically a session note is a screenshot of what we've been doing and also where they can go next. Okay, during the weekend, you can do this, this, and this. But if they don't, then, we pick up where we need to. It's a fluidity of that. Professional collaboration. I work with teams of teachers. We've met with OTs. We've met with different varieties of key stakeholders. Basically, we are all team this child, insert child's name, because that's how we learn. And I think that the more people with their hands in the pot, the better we are. So we just want to support those families and make sure they're confident in where we're going.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. We see it as a tripod effect. We want to ensure that we have constant contact with both the caregivers as well as the teaching team, whether that be anybody within the multidisciplinary team. But we also have access to educational specialists and other team members within our network. So we have an ABA therapist, we have MFTs, we have an educational psychologist. We have all these resources that we can pull into the mix to ensure that we're again communicating proactively, but also putting that learner on the path and providing what they need in a whole child approach.
Plus, it also allows us to co-team. So I would say in the co-teaching model. So if there's a skill set that's work in the OT classroom that I can incorporate, especially when you're talking about anxiety or some of those things, are there key phrases that you're working on?
That's right.
Are there key exercises that we can incorporate in those are allowed to come in as well?
Yes, absolutely. Consistency is the key, and that leads to our school support. Ensuring that we provide educators just as much support as we're providing our parents is very imperative to ensure that we're having that consistent approach in place. And so we welcome the opportunity to screen individuals, learners, classrooms, communities to ensure that we're able to provide differentiated instruction or strategies. We can even build lesson plans to help scaffold and support your teaching team. We are currently in school partnerships, and we're offering office hours where it's an open forum. Teachers can join at any point and ask any pressing questions that arose that week. And we also prepare topics. So it serves as a professional development opportunity as well. I'll let Taya add to this, but I just got so excited that I wanted to the school support.
Yeah, the thing is I remember when I first started teaching, you had so much information coming at you, and you're in the thick of it. So sometimes it's good to know that you're never alone, and you have someone that is almost like a personal coach that's there to answer your questions. And if that means, like Jess said, that you pipe us in and go, I'm seeing this, what do I do?
Right.
That's something that we can go, oh, have you tried this, this, or this? Or if there's some lesson that you really want to convey, but it's multi-tiered, there's a lot to it, maybe we can give some insight on how to best address that. So the workshops are as broad or as small as you need. I remember sometimes those meetings after school, you've been teaching all day, and the idea of hitting even an hour and a half workshop, and you're like, I can't take one thing in. I like to do small bits. So, you're going to take away one thing that you can do in your classroom tomorrow. Boom, done. So aside from those larger in-services, just give us the time as far as, those questions, like she said. I'm going to give you one thing you can do. Ready? I'm not going to overwhelm you. I'm going to give you one thing. And, it's like you have the best intentions to read that stack of books and all those different wonderful ideas. And, if you read them, you're going to do wonderful in class, but you're exhausted. So allow our years of knowledge, our collective years of knowledge to assist in giving that one thing that's going to just help slowly tip the scales for you.
Yes, real-time grabs. I remember
Real-time
that.
grabs. I love
As a teacher in the classroom, absolutely. This is just a review. We spoke to those points, but I think it's important just to review the fact that our process starts with the caregiver. We like to make sure we're taking into account everything that you observe first and foremost as either an educator or or caregiver, I should say. So we have inventories and questionnaires that we provide our caregiver and teaching teams to make sure that we're taking in that information and we see it from your perspective. This can also include a file review where we're looking at work samples, prior reports, report cards, whatever you think would be beneficial to paint the picture of your learner. Then we differentiate and we conduct a 2-hour learner assessment based on whether the concerns are within executive functioning, literacy, and math. Then we create a learner profile, as we spoke to, that includes the learning style as well as the individualized recommendations. Within those recommendations, we talk through the potential educational specialists who we think would be a good fit, both personality and certification wise, and we review the findings at the same time. So we're really painting a narrative of your learner, starting with your input and then ending with our findings to come up with a plan to place them in that positive trajectory.
And I just wanted to add, if I could, Jess,
Yeah.
is sometimes we're given IEPs and you have that quick snapshot where the team's all there and you have a psychologist and you have an ed spec, and then you're trying to go, okay, now what does this look like in my classroom? That's where we come in and I can say, okay, I can help you with the IEP and I can help delineate, okay, in the classroom, this is what this is going to look like and this is what you can do. And this is going to just be good for everyone. This isn't going to be, oh my gosh, now I got an IEP for this kid. So our recommendations are always going to be, how can I meet this child's need in the greater setting and make your life easier?
Differentiation, absolutely at its finest. And I think sometimes we hear the word differentiation and we get bogged down as educators. And in reality, that's a great point, Taya. It really is to benefit everyone in the classroom community. So I appreciate you mentioning that. We just wanted to broad stroke our Learnfully programs. We've talked to the fact that intensive remediation is the key for really strengthening those underlying sensory cognitive pathways that support and allow a learner to access their potential. If a learner is not in need of intensive remediation, if we don't see a wide enough disparity between their potential and performance, or if a learner has already been through an intensive remedial program, then we would recommend enrichment in one of two forms or both forms, depending on the learner. An enrichment workshop is usually either 2-on-1 or small group. It can be individualized as well. Enrichment allows us to pinpoint a specific target skill like essay writing, study skills, mathematical computation or word problems. So it really is a targeted program that occurs a couple times a week for a number of weeks over the summer months and into the fall to ensure generalization takes place. We also have our Rise and Shine summer boosts, which are super fun. They're our way of reviewing the prior year's concepts, standards, content, and then previewing the overarching themes that are about to present themselves in the classroom the following year to really set our learners on that secure path so they can run into the classroom with enthusiasm and confidence. We thank you all so much for coming. Of course, we're going to open up the floor for a couple questions. We don't have much time, but we do welcome the opportunity to connect with you. You can call us, email, text us, find us on social. We would love to continue this conversation outside of the webinar. But first and foremost, let's answer a couple questions. Are you game, Taya?
I guess so.
Okay, so what came in is that we acknowledge that observation can be really difficult virtually. So can you explain how we have these opportunities for observation and consultation in a school environment?
That's a good question. So, I understand that there's permissions, there's that as far as is observation stuff. There's a few ways that we can go about it. One would be to have the child in a small group setting where the camera's focused on the child. But also there's sometimes, I'm sure everyone is at some point or have heard of filling out like a berry or some kind of check sheet. So it can give us sometimes we can go off of, hey, here is a possibilities. Are you seeing this, or this, some rating scales? And that can give us a lot of information and guide our instruction. Now, if that is not enough, if we do that, we can quickly evolve into a bringing us in virtually, which I'm sure everyone's adept at doing now. So that is something that we can do. I think as far as is what we're looking at is, I'm sure when you're thinking of behaviors or that kind of thing, sometimes even with us looking at their IEP, sometimes the MD report can give us a lot of background knowledge. And just from that and discussing with a teacher, we can bring you about some recommendations from that early on, something they can give you right away while we're waiting for permissions and stuff. In with everything with education, it's case by case basis,
Right.
and we evolve with it. So I think what this whole program is looking to do is to break the barriers.
Certainly.
We're looking at breaking those barriers, like, okay, I have to wait 30 days, I have to wait 60 days, I have to wait 90 days. That's not the case. We're going to, if there's something, we can give you something right away to give you in your classroom, within 24, 36 hours, boom, 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 that if there's a wait for, like I said, permissions and stuff from parents, that you have something to go from. So you're not going, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow?
Right, right. We expedite not just through consultation, but we expedite the chance for the learner to, of course, make progress. And so oftentimes we have caregivers and educators who are constantly on wait lists for testing and educational support. And our mission is to eliminate that waiting period, because all the while the learner is falling further and further behind. So if we can provide consultation, tips, tricks, strategies to put the learner on the path in an expedited fashion, that's our goal wholeheartedly. So I
Exactly.
totally agree. Thank you for that. Can you talk about the screening from an educational specialist perspective? You have such great, valuable experience. Can you bring a little bit of the experience into this discussion?
So my background is in, as I mentioned before, is in primary, K-6 education and the general ed and the special ed side. So when I'm looking at screening, I'm looking at, when I was helping to develop it, I was looking at two things. One, what's with the general ed classroom, and then two, what's the special ed classroom, because children can have feet in both.
Hmm.
So what the screening it does that's different is that we're not just giving them a benchmark, we're giving them a benchmark or a snapshot in time that tells us, where they fell off. So your child's not reading in second grade. Well, you don't want to just have them read. Some kids, that's not the key. So by understanding where they fell off, we can plug those holes developmentally as to what we're going to work on that's going to help you in the classroom. And also, what if they're reading
Hmm.
and they're not writing? We want
Right.
to make sure we're not just focusing on writing, but we're also bumping the reading up so that they feel engaged and they know that the thing that they identify as their skill set is being recognized. So we want to make sure we're it's kind of that twice exceptional. You want to make sure that you're taking care of the needs, but you're also taking care of that enrichment component at all times.
Right.
And that can be done if we have appropriate screeners. So I go back to the developmental phases, understanding what those are can help us where they fell off.
That's absolutely right. It's the pinpointing, right? And I believe
Absolutely.
that we would be able to alleviate quite a lot of pressure in the classroom if we could take
Oh,
a bit of the screening process off your plate as an educator, right? To provide that insight, but also to provide baselines and to make sure that we're communicating that information directly to you so you can dive in to the instructional piece, and just alleviate the time and pressure that some of these screenings take for every classroom teacher. So,
especially when you have 30 on up students
yes, that's
and
right.
they're not reading second grade, they're in second grade. It takes how much time to go and lower to where they're at. And then
Mhm.
the child's frustrated. There's fires going off in the room. You you want to make sure. So we're just a helping hand. We're like, you know what? We're going to come in and take that off your plate. We're going to help you isolate where they're at. If you have a book box in their classroom, what are some good books that's going to make them feel good about reading, but also there is at their level and it's independently.
Yes, I totally agree. We're running up against time, but I just briefly, can you mention how we perceive behavior as impacting instructional progress?
Okay, so behavior is telling us something, and understanding what behavior tells us is important. So we are looking at a couple different things as far as behavior. we want to make sure that we're separating out if the child's having going back to the processing disorders, that, let's face it, a large portion of children have to some degree. We want to make sure that by addressing some of those needs appropriately, believe it or not, the behaviors for a lot of kids will go away. And I know that it seems amazing, but I actually had my last classroom experience. I took all these different components in. I did a whole group setting because none of my second graders read on grade level. None of them. In fact, half of them were pre-primer. I mean, they didn't know all the letters. So I had to come up with something fast. And so by looking at, I only had a couple of them that were actually identified, because let's face it, a lot of kids aren't identified until third grade. Right. We're facing that. So by understanding what these look like in the classroom, which is what we can assist you with, it can help you go, I wonder if this one has this. You don't need a diagnosis to provide
That's right.
good education, because it's going to be great for everyone.
Right.
So the behaviors is telling you something. Kids want to do well. They want to do. So what is their antecedent? What is causing the behavior? Is it the fact that they're trying to remove themselves to save face? Is it because they're gaining a laugh? Is it, understanding that behavior goes a lot to helping us solve it.
Absolutely. It's symptomatic, right? There's something else going on. And so I appreciate that you targeted the underlying skills to build confidence and success and feelings of potential, right? Seeing themselves as a learner and feeling like they're seen and heard so they can reach that potential. I think it's key. And some of those behaviors start to eliminate on their own organically. So, well, thank you. That's all the time we have. I so greatly appreciate you with me, Taya, in this mission, Learnfully's mission, as well as this webinar. We appreciate you all coming. And if there's any questions that we weren't able to get to, we promise to circle back.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.